You only chopped a tree down that was valuable, worth money to you. It was a lot of effort to get it from where you fell it into the river, so you didn't chop anything down that you could go around because it was easier to go around it than to chop it down. So we didn't destroy anything. We cut a few good mill logs. Different to modern day where they clear fell everything and the whole bush is gone, there's nothing left. You kill the bush. We didn't ever destroy the bush. You could fly over where we worked and you won't see where we were. You can't see where we worked. It's good. It's just taken over by the bush again. The quality of the timber was important. Each river has a different quality pine. I mean, you can tell that Andrew River from the King River, from the Gordon River, from the Sprent River, Jane, they all got a different quality of pine. And you can tell by looking at the log even where they come from.
You want to know about the leatherwood?
I do.
Well, the salve, the little buds would be on it. Little buds, they're like a little, well, it's a sort of browny sort of a colour. And you pinch them all off. In them days, there was the tin matchboxes. For the wax matches used to come in tins. You bought them in little tins, wax matchbox tins. And they were ideal to put them in. You'd put them in and put them by the fire and warm it so it'd melt into the... You'd have it in you could carry it with you. Well, if you had cracks in your hands in there, or caused by the axe, or if you cut yourself and it was sore, never healed up. See, up there we never used to worry much. If you had a bit of a cut, you'd wrap it up with a bit of rag and you never had to worry about blood poisoning. With all that rough tucker. And I think it was the water, the limestone water, along with the Yuan pine on the instruments you cut yourself with. That was my theory of that. There's no doubt about Yuan pine as antiseptic. She's one hell of an antiseptic, but vicious. Vicious. All right?
What do you mean?
Well, it's hot. Burn. It burns. You can rub a bit of it on you, it sort of makes it burns a bit. Won't blister you, but it burns. I told you I got on my razor, on my brush there, out of my bag, and I shaved. I thought I'd got it out with soap. But no, I put it on my face. The bloody pine oil was still in the bloody... And when I shaved, you could feel it burning around in the little bug of the pine oil. I wished I'd left it home. Yeah, it could burn a nerve, yeah. So if you had a hollow tooth, if a tooth cracked, if, you know, when you have a tooth go hollow and you find the bloody piece is gone, and every time you eat it, something gets in it and drive you mad, well, if you had enough guts in you to get a little bit of stick and stick in a bit of pine oil and poke it in the tooth, it'd burn the nerve out. And it'd bloody near blow your head off while it was doing it, but no more toothache. It'd be no more toothache. Finished. Yeah. I did tell you about Jimmy Grinan. That's Jimmy and... what was the other fellow's name? His brother got killed. But Jimmy, they had a little marine engine there, a little, I think it was about 4 or 5 horse pup, little pup motor, had a little pupping around, and they decided to try a bit of this pine oil in the petrol. They put a bit in and blew the bloody head off the motor. No, that did happen. That's an old story I'm storing. In the respect of my first trip up the river, as a lad, among the worst bloody things I found was leeches in the bush, because I wasn't prepared for leeches. Oh, they're terrible bloody things, but if you looked after you...
I've heard some shocking stories about leeches, you know.
Yeah, well, I worked in them. We worked in them, and that was something I did find terrible when I first went in the river. I'd forgotten about that when you asked me. That was the first introduction to them bloody things. They got all in me pants everywhere. Fortunately enough, they didn't get in one spot. But you had to wear bowie hangs, and you wear underpants tied at the bottom. And you always had to make sure the crotch of your pants and that around all was solid, sealed up. Because they would come and they'd get on you and they'd be coming up you like little men everywhere, heading for a bloody spot to fang you. And there's nothing they like better than around your backside. They love getting in there. And a lot of blokes wouldn't leave. My brother bloody, that's Marshall, that's Marshall's father. They rode him to bloody straw and he never had a piss for 2 days.
What happened?
Blocked his pizzle up with a leech. Leech blocked his pizzle up. Got up in his pizzle and it went bad and they couldn't get the bugger out. And he was in there and he had to take him. When the old doctor got him in the surgery in Strawn, he got a thing in his pizzle and he fired the piss up into the... Yeah. He's only a young man. Bloody near killed him, he bloody near died. Very cruel bloody thing, wasn't it? Couldn't piss. Well, I've been through that, but not through that, like that, not through a leech. Not through a leech, yes.
So
But they'd get at you anywhere. They'd get in your eyes, around your ears. They just loved getting they just loved getting in under the backs of your legs, into them soft spots. Yeah, it's like buggery, they're buggers, yeah. Oh, yeah. The best thing to do with them, if they're on you, was a bit of tobacco, a little bit of tobacco rub if you're a smoker. If you didn't, well, you had matches, so you struck a bloody match and stuck it on the bugger. But don't pull him off. If you pulled him off, a sting, you'd leave a sting and you wouldn't, you'd be, oh, you'd get better, but it's not the same. Make him let you go. He fell up with blood and then, I don't know whether he hatched another lot of eggs or what, but I don't know. He'd fill right up with blood, by hell they would. No, the leatherwood, when the flowers fall off it, after the bees, as you know, it's recognised as a lovely leatherwood honey. Well, I don't know, it's a bit powerful for me. I'm not a lover of it, but the bees in the Gordon River's home of bees, everyone knows that. And if you don't know it, well, it's an unknown fact that in there, believe it as wet and all as it is, it was terrifying in the summer and you got a few fine days, the amount of bees that was in the bush. We had trouble with our horses one day. Talking about, I'll get away from it. Bees, I'll get away from it. Bees, they'd swarm. And horses are terrified of bees. If anyone's had anything to do with a horse, a bloody bee will drive a horse mad. And they were buggers, the bees would be swarming and they'd be over just above. You know, what would bring them down, I think, we'd be using the axes or the hammers or something, making a noise, and the queen bee would come down and they'd follow down. I think that's what it was, but anyhow, that's not what you wanted to know.
Sawmiller Fred Grining financed a logging operation in the Jane River. Unnavigable by rowing punt, the site had to be reached via a 20-mile walking track from the Lyle Highway. Charles Abel and his 3 eldest sons pioneered the operation, cutting a track and building a log cabin.
Well, Dad and the boys, that's the boys of my brothers, cut the foot track from the West Coast Road into the timber, and where they crossed the Franklin River and the Loddon River, they built a special high-level flood crossing out of wire, 3 strands of wire, one on each side to hang on to and one to walk on. The straps every so often to stop them from separating. They built one of these across the Franklin and one across the Loddon. And I just don't know how long it took them to cut that track, but they were weeks at it. And after cutting it, they said, oh, well, it's time to go to work now. They were cutting the pie, but cutting the track wasn't work. That was just doing the job to get to work. It was a hard life indeed. It was very tough. When we first started out there, it's my family. The West Coast Road had just been opened up between Queenstown and Hobart. It hadn't been completed, but it went out to 30 miles. And so they take their stuff out to 30 miles, and then they backpack it in from there over the Franklin Range and down across the Loddon and all the way out to the Jane River. That was about 25 miles backpacking. When you got there was a beautiful river in the top end of it, quiet, slow moving, and lovely. One big creek ran into it called Thurkles Creek. And that had the greatest flat of human pine I've ever seen in my life. And not only that, there was nothing else there. There was human pine and ferns. No scrubs, nothing. It was the most beautiful patch of river I've ever seen. But of course, it didn't take long to look at either. And I was only a boy when I went out there. I was only 10. I went out with my cousin, and we nearly died walking out there. Too far. But it was all right. When we got there, they built a log hut, like the old Western log cabins, you know. And they decided to put a piling roof on it, because the snow in the winter, the canvas huts used to collapse. So they built one out of palings, and we went with them while they cut palings about 3 miles away from where the hut was, a King Billy pine, which makes the best piling roofs. And they used to carry these palings, 50 or 80 at a time, crisscrossed and across their shoulders. And snakes, I've never seen so many snakes in all my life. They used to kill them in those days, because a snake was a dead snake, and that was it. And there would be snakes everywhere. They used to carry special weapons for snakes. Every time they moved anywhere, they took a snake killer with them. But they finished this hut off. And it was a good, comfortable, warm, always good house. First started to log from the West Coast Road, and then they decided they needed a punt. So they had to bring one up the river. They couldn't bring one out and down across the Buttongrass Plains 20 miles. They wouldn't go down the Franklin, and they couldn't go down the Jane. And if they went down the Franklin, they still have to come back up the Jane. So they decided to bring the punt from Strawn and go up the Franklin and into the Jane and up the Jane. The Jane has 3 gorges up to where the timber was. They went through the first gorge with the punt. I'm not too sure whether they went through the second one or whether it was the third one. But I think they went through the second gorge with the punt. But the third one, they just couldn't get through it. So the old man said, well, if we can't go through it, let's go over it. And they went over the hill to the left-hand side of the river going up. And they went up about 2,000 feet, I suppose, and down the other side into the river again. And then they used the punt in the river from then on. It's nice and flat and level and clean river from then on. Do you know what a block and tackle is when I'm talking about a block and tackle? In their case, it'd be 2 and 1, double and single block. And you've got to put a holdfast in to hold the single block in place while you pull up to it. At the same time, you couldn't have the butt hitting on rocks. It had to go on smooth going all the time. So where there was any rocks, they had to take skids from down at where the tree line was. Of course, this was over Buttongrass Hill. They had to take skids up to keep the punt above the rocks. And then all the same on the other side, when they go down, they had to keep skids underneath it to lower it down again on the other side. So they carry skids up and skids down to keep the punt on safety. They also had to make holdfasts to put the rope in to hold them to pull it on. So it was quite an effort. It was quite a big job. And that was an 18-foot punt too.
After some time, Abels abandoned the logging operation to work on the nearby Jane River alluvial gold field. Grining sent 3 other men out to take over the job. Albert Grining was in charge. Ron Penny was his offsider.
Yeah, we had to go down and check, assess the timber. And Nano, we called him Albert, was his name. We never called him Nano. He was in charge, and I was sort of assistant with him, and Wally, her name just at the moment, is gone. Anyhow, there's the 4 of us. We're the same 4 that done that, and we went and got the boat out of there. We went down the Jane, and I don't know now, it was quite a few weeks. That was an ordeal. That was an ordeal because we only took the flour and that with us, and I had 3 snares. I was able to get the meat. I'd catch a snare of wallaby. I thought it was going to be some heroic, something great, and I think it may have been too, but it wasn't recognised at the time. But it was, and when we started with it, and we got down so far, and then I said, God, Ron, he said, I think we better go back. I said, mate, we can't go back. I said, this damn thing was brought up here. We're capable of taking it out. We're as good as the buggers that brought it in. That's the words I said. So we kept going, and we found some damn obstacles and places shocking. But we took the boat out, and we took it out and took it around and over, cut poles and stuff and took it down, right through the river, all the way, right through.
These men didn't know that the Abels had taken the punt out of the river altogether and hauled it over a hill, still marked on the maps as Punt Hill, which is across the river from Abels Peak.
When Abels first went to the Jane, they actually had 3 rowing boats. And when you come to the first gorge, you've got to take the boat over Overland, which is about 2,000 foot high, the hill, and they cut tracks up over the top of that, and they took the 3 punts over. They left one on the other side of the gorge and took the other 2 on up, and when they got through the next gorge, they left a punt there, and then they took the other one through the top gorge, which wasn't so bad as the other one, 2 gorges, and they used that up at the camp for doing or clearing logs or crossing the river, whatever they wanted to do. So they had actually 3 rowing boats in the Jane.
And it was terrifying. And we were terrified because we knew when we got so far that we had to, our boat was our lifeline. See, in those places, if you fly over it today in a helicopter or an aeroplane, well, you can imagine yourself down in there with no other means of being able to get out or whatever. And we knew that, and we stayed as a 4 of a bunch of, we were very tightly clapped. We didn't worry about anything. We had one thing in mind, and we done what we had to do, and we got through. And there's been a lot of contradictions. I don't care. It's the truth, and that's all that matters. We done it, and we got down the river, and they were on our way. Gordon Grind was on his way coming up the Franklin, hoping they'd find us. My dad had been killed, and that was on the 13th of January 1935. It was on the second day, you know, but we didn't get very far in the day because we had things to do besides. We didn't just a matter of get down there. It wasn't a matter just to get down. He was taking out the logs and stuff. Anyway, well, when we got down into this gorge, we were terrified. We were terrified. And if you panicked, you don't panic. You couldn't panic because if you did that, well, you'd be, well, that'd be it. That's the end of the line. So there was none of that. We just ground our teeth together and kept poking along down. We one day there. I feel there in one particular day, I don't think we got any more than 3 or 4 chain of the boat. It was shocking. And that must have been where they took it over the hill, because there's no way knowing you to get the boat up through it. That's what had us. Now that's the story I never thought of telling you before. We never couldn't realise where the hell where they took the boat, or why they've took it over the mountain there, or over the range, or what they called it, Punt Hill or something. I don't know. I wouldn't know. But all I know is we followed the river, because we knew the river run into the Franklin run into the Gordon. And he said, we'll follow her down, and that's what we did. And that's it. Well, we had to keep it on wood to the best of our ability, because of rocks, limestone, and that big, you know. And the river was very narrow and rugged, and we kept it on wood as much as possible. And we carried it light, not heavy, that 2 of us, one on each end, could lift it, and the 4 of us could handle it, if you understand.
You have to take your stores and everything out and carry them along?
Oh, yeah, what we had was not much. Wasn't much. There was only a bit of flour. I tell you what, we lived on flapjacks. There's no making bread. There's no making bread. We used to just mix of flour and water and do it in the frying, making the pan flapjack. Well, she's tough going, mate. Tough going. Well, we never really lost control of it, but we had a hell of a job to. Yeah, we had that in mind, that we couldn't lose it. We just had to, whatever happened, it was number one. We just had to. If we'd have lost it, well, we wouldn't. I don't think I'd be here now at that particular time. We didn't know any of it was in front of us. We didn't know. But all we knew was the boat had come up, and he took it up, and we were taking it out. As far as we knew, they'd brought it up the river. Well, when we came to the one particular, you've got a photo of that. Yeah, one particular waterfall we come to, and it had us didn't know what we were going to do with it. So we had the block and tackle, of course. We had that with us, and we got the single block, one of the double and single. We used the single block, the old out, and we hooked it up to make sure, and we had the punt going down over on the edge on wood, going down the waters. Well, the water was under the boat, but no water in amongst the rocks. You couldn't float it. It wasn't wide enough. So we made it so as we could get with the wood, keep shifting the wood from you call them skids if you call them, and we'd shifted one down, and the boat was pretty near on us, pretty well up and down. We had to go very quiet with it, and it was very terrifying. We give her a few bumps and knocks, but that's the only thing I can tell you. All I know is we got it through there all right. When we came to the last one, was the worst of all, where the big rock was a thumping big rock. And if I remember rightly, that photo's in the book. I'm not sure. It should be. There's this big rock, and they'd taken a photo of the boat in the river below it, so you could see that it'd come down. There's a great big rock sitting fair in the middle of the river. He was a beauty. We had to take it out around him on the end, around the end of him. We had some fun getting around that. It was terrifying, but we got it. When we got to the Franklin, we were home and hosed, and we were that thrilled when I tell you the story of the Franklin. I can tell you this story it's really lovely. It was just like, well, it was beautiful, and four of us were so thrilled. When we got towards the big fall in the Franklin, we were so happy we overlooked the factories right to it, and it was too late. It was too late. The water was taken, so we just gritted our teeth and over we went. And we got out the bottom. The boat was nearly half full of water. We had enough, got off and got it, bailed her out. And I can't tell you for sure how we bailed it out now, but we emptied her out anyway, and everything was all right. But that was a suicidal thing to done, but we done it. And we laughed our heads off. We were on the way, 3 or 4 of us. I'll never forget Nana. Never ever forget his face. God, he said, we'd have never done that if we hadn't just come out of hell. Yeah.
Yes.
I don't know how I survived it. From what I've been told by Dad and the boys, it's a marvellous job they've done. How they got that punt out down through there, Lord knows. But he'll have to tell you himself, he'll know, but I would never be able to tell you.
Okay, that's fine.
We never had any sugar. We had tea, but no sugar. And as for milk and butter and things like that, we never ever had butter in there anyway. So we had flour and salt. Carried plenty of salt and pepper. It was 2 things we were never without. I had 3 wallaby snares, and one of my jobs was to find a wallaby track and get a wallaby for food. And I remember rightly, we'd probably eat the bugger before he was cold. We didn't worry about him. We just, you're hungry. I can see things a lot of people would never know now. I can understand people when they're hungry how they eat different things. We were hungry. We're only young people, but we were sort of happy.
I can't understand why anybody didn't know that it was taken over Punt Hill, because it was common knowledge to us anyhow that it had been taken over the hill. I don't know why everybody didn't know.
Following this episode, Fred Grining sent another gang of men, including Bill Grining and Reg Morrison, out to the Jane to commence logging once more.
Yeah, Fred Grining was a chap that had a sawmill at Strawn, and I was out of work at the time because we'd had a few accidents. Brother had broke his leg in the Rocky Sprint, and the other brother had cut his toe off, so I was left more or less free for quite a while, because they was going to be quite a while getting over their injuries. So Mr. Grining asked me if I would go out and take a couple of fellas to the Jane and cut some timber for him and put in the Jane River. And the Jane River, of course, where the pine was there, was about 20 miles below, south of the West Coast Road. And it happened to be in the winter time when we went there, and it is a pretty rugged place, a long walk and a long way to pack tucker. At times, we cut about 70 or 80,000 feet of timber, but we had to go in about every fortnight to get supplies, flour and different things. And there was trucks that went through. That was a lot of men working square and sleepers on the West Coast Road at that time, and they used to travel have all the necessary things for men working in the bush. So we used to work it out that we went in on the Friday, and we would pick up flannels or axe handles or whatever we needed, and a bit of fruit or whatever, and a bit of stuff, and make up our pack. But at most times there was about 8 or 10 inches of snow on the journey, or it was a bad winter, and it was a pretty. You had to go up and the turn off the Frenchman's Cap was at the Loddon River there, and we used to turn to the right and go up over a pretty rugged little range of button grass on the top and down the other side, and then cross over the Loddon River. With 6 or 8 inches of snow, it was pretty hard, and it was very soft and boggy button grass, wet, and very hard to walk in. I used to carry about 85 pound, or 80 pound anyway. If it was a bag of flour, you'd knock that in half and take half of it, and probably chuck a couple of tins of jam and 3 or 4 or 5 apples on top to eat on the way out. And we're going out this day, and there was a kangaroo hopped up, and I said to my mates, Bill Grinan and this other chap, and I said, I reckon I could catch one of them. And they said, that'll be today. So I downed the pack, and I made a run for him, and the kangaroo took off, and of course he left me 100 yards behind in the first 50 yards, but I kept going and kept going. The further the kangaroo got, the less he won. So I eventually caught up with him and got him, and they wouldn't believe it, but they saw it, so they had to believe it. And so I just grabbed him with the tail and let him go. So then went back and got our pack, and we had to. It used to take about 11 hours to do the pack from the West Coast camp on the road to the Jane camp. And we'd get away at daylight in the morning, and it'd be dark, a good half hour dark by the time you got to the camp. But the last 3/4 of an hour or so was, of course, a button grass plain, and then just 20 or 30 yards where we knew the track was, down to the Jane and across a big log that we used to get across and get to the camp. But you'd be pretty stiff and sore. We used to, Silsberg was a bloke that he suggested we take some methylated spirits with us. So he said, lay down across the table there and I'll give you a rub down. I had a couple of lumps on the back, and when he put this methylated spirit, it like it threw ice on my back. So I don't know whether I'd done any good or not, but anyhow, I done him and the other fella, and we were safe in the camp for another fortnight. It was quite a big camp. They had about 12 or 14 feet and a chimney in one end of it. And the back end would take about 8 people to sleep. And in the summertime, you're pretty hot out there, and a hell of a lot of snakes, about the worst place I've ever seen for snakes. And I was laying in the bed one night. When they built it, they must have put palings along the joints of these seams to seal it up better. And of course, I'm laying awake about 1 o'clock in the morning, so I could hear this sliding sort of a noise. And I'm thinking about these snakes, and I thought, well, I'm out of here, so I don't know whether I just rose out of the bed, blankets and all dropped on the floor, but that's what I did. And we went to work next day, and on the way back, in the camp there was rafters, of course, and we used to leave all the paddles up on the rafters, probably about 4 or 5 sets of paddles, to make sure that nothing happened to them, as the Abels had plenty of paddles and all there that they'd made. And I just took a step in the door, and a great snake dropped right at my feet, and I nearly somersaulted backwards, nearly knocked old Bill down and Silverberger behind him. And this great snake, but we got him all right. And there's a hell of a lot of snakes there. I remember when Harry Smith came out after they took over the job from Grinings, poor old Fred sort of went insolvent over it all. I think it was a bit rigged actually, and with the grocers and the people, and Howard got the job, and Harry Smith came out, and he wanted me to show him around a bit, so we set up a stream up along the Jane, and there was a hell of a lot of pine just above the camp. Even there was great trees leaning backwards and forwards, that heavy, thick on the banks of the river that it had a hell of a job to form. But up further, there was an island up there, and it had no end of yew and pine on it. But on the way up to Shoning, a lot of timber that was there, we killed 5 snakes on the way up. And one particular place, the first one, I heard an axe come whistling past me and stuck in the ground, and luckily enough it landed alongside the snake and pinned him into the ground.
The Spero River enters the sea south of Point Hibbs on the west coast. Victor Nielsen and sons Oscar, Horace and Roy commenced a pining operation there in 1929. Firstly, access was by walking track from Birches Inlet.
Yes, well, the Spiro venture was something different. The Spiro River is on the west coast of Tasmania, near Point Hibbs, very rough. It's about 16 miles from the tip of Birches Inlet, which runs off Macquarie Harbour. This is how you get to it overland. You go up as far as you can up Birches Inlet, and then up a little creek, and then it's button grass for about 4 miles, and then you hit the it's hardly a rainforest, but could be in places. And then you get the Spiro River. You get the Spiro River about halfway up from the source of it. Now, it was fairly well known that there was lovely stands of yew and pine in the Spiro River, but it was inaccessible through Macquarie Harbour. So it had to be got out on the Southern Ocean, which is a very rough ocean. And of course it was something to do with boats, and this is what my old father really lapped up, anything to do with a boat. They'd heard of these people in New Zealand, these millers that was in the kauri pine business, towing their logs. What they call towing is you pull behind your boat a wire which you get fastened to your logs. Instead of dragging these logs through the water side by side like they did in the Macquarie Harbour from the Gordon River, they pulled these logs end on end, 2 abreast, along a long wire rope. And in New Zealand they seem to be able to do it through rough seas. Well, this was the the idea of the Spiro venture. So I was getting a bit short of funds, and my old father offered to fund himself until it got going. Well, this meant cutting a walking track from Birches Inlet into the middle of the Spero River. We hadn't then got a boat suitable to go around the rough seas. So we had to go across from Birches Inlet, and everything was on our backs again here, packing. It was a longer track than what the Sprint was. Uphill, and a very rough track too, uphill, down dale. Well, we packed everything through into the Spiro River. That was my father's part. We built a tent, got blown out of it. We built a hut out of split paling and got more consolidated there. Well, our job was cutting the timber out of the Spiro River so as you could put your logs into the river and they'd float down to the mouth.
Almost totally obscured by fallen timber, this is the mouth of a creek entering the Gordon River. In creeks and rivers like these, a tremendous amount of work was required to remove the debris before hewn pine logs could be floated down them. This was termed cutting out the river or creek. Nielsen's spent a year cutting out 4 miles of the Spiro River.
Well, this is what we, the Nielsens, was doing. Now, the other part was more or less left to George Smith. Earlier to his partner, Edgerton. I think later on Edgerton went out of it for some reason or other. Whether it was bankruptcy or not, I don't know. But it was then left to George Smith and my father. Well, the thing of getting the timber from the mouth of the Spiro River to Strawn was always very high. I call it hypothetical, if I don't know what the name would be. To us 3 boys, it was never seemed to be going as good as it should be. There was a tug in Strawn at the time called the Maitlands. Well, not a very good tug. Bricky Grinan, the miller, owned it. There was supposed to be consultation between him and George Smith about the towing of the logs from the Spiro River round to Strawn. But Bricky Grinan never seemed to ever know anything about it. But of course my old father, he was in his element with just putting logs into the Spiro River, regardless of how you was going to get them out. It was all just more or less a dream. Of course, he'd got us 3 boys. We'd gone to Melbourne to get work, and we worked over there for a short time. And of course, we was glad to get out of Melbourne, getting back into the pine under any circumstances. And of course, we were lapping it up because we was glad to be back into pining. But of course, the future, we was working on our father's money. And eventually, I forget how it come about, I eventually built this boat, the Why Worry. And it eventually got a 35 horsepower kerosene motor into it. And I think by this time we'd come around to the Sprint and was working there, but the old father was still heavily bent on proving that logs could be towed up from the Spero River. And eventually he did go down and tow up some logs from the Spiro River in this boat. Him and my oldest brother. Well, that started it off. And then there was a syndicate formed by the local butcher, Hayes, and the baker, Marsden. A syndicate of 3. They put money into a venture. My father's share was the work we had done at the Spiro River and the logs that was already in it. So they'd formed a 3-part partnership. By this time I'd got sick of it and I'd left my interest there. Well, then they bought a steamship called the Gundia, a very solid vessel that was down the Huon. It used to cart apples around into Hobart from a very solid, built a blue gum, but had not much power, 7 knots at the best, a steam engine, wood-fired boiler. Well, they carried on with this Gundia for a while, and I think they did bring loads up from the Spiro there. They eventually took horses down, and of course this was later on when I was working in Mount Lyell, I think. And from there, it had a bit of a history, which you might know more about it than I do. When they introduced horses there eventually. But there was quite a lot of timber come up from the Spiro River. Howard, the sawmiller, he got mixed up in it because I think he was taking the timber, a lot of the timber. Anyhow, that was that venture. Yeah, I think I mentioned we used to have to pack our food over this track. Well, I eventually built a boat, 33, 34 foot long, that was capable of going around, but we had to get a safe mooring around at Point Hibbs, which was near the Spiro River. Well, the only safe mooring was a little gulch way, I suppose you'd call it, but it didn't have a very big entrance, and there was fairly jagged rocks underneath, but high enough to put a hole in your boat with the surge that used to come in. So there was one rock which was the main danger, and he was a little bit jagged, but he was only down about, well, we could stand on the sand near him and still have your head out of water, which give it about a 6-foot draft, which was enough. But we eventually got rid of this jagged rock.
The West Coast is notorious for its rain. It used to be said that it rains for 9 months of the year and drips off the trees for the other 3.
Well, it was wet and cold, miserable winters, always. Always wet, mostly cold. You were wet all day in the winter because the scrub contained or held the raindrops all the time. Whenever you hit a scrub, it showered you with water, so you were wet all the time. So we used to wear flannel clothes, long flannel underpants, a flannel shirt next to your skin, and another flannel over the top we called an over flannel, which we smoked in the fire of the hut in the chimney at night. And it got a lot of smoke in it, and the smokehouse oil that helped to waterproof the flannel. And so we used to wear the over flannel over the others. And we used to have an expression we had, but when you were wearing flannels, it didn't matter how wet and cold it was, you was always warm dry. So they were great clothes. We wore boyings to help keep the weight off our hips. And we wore bowing goes round above the calf of your leg and ties your trousers to above the calf of your leg. That carries the weight of the lower part of your trousers and you haven't got the drag on your hips. It makes you feel a lot better at the end of the day. We never wore long coats of any sort because the longer the coat, the heavier it was and the wetter it was, the more it dragged around you when you tried to use it. So that's why we wore any flannels. And they were great. We wore slouch hats, army slouch hats, second-hand ones. And we used to waterproof them with candle fat. Drip candles and rub the fat around the crowns and around the brims above the brim. And that made them heavy, but they also made them more waterproof. So we were quite, really very well equipped, considering there was none of the modern day stuff that available to us. But while we had the flannels, we were quite warm. No, it was a way of life. We understood that that was part of life, that was how we lived, and we just looked forward to getting back to the camp, getting dry warm clothes on, light a big fire, nice and warm, and have a nice meal at tea time. Of course, our nice meal was a stew.
You battled away, it's always wet. You was always in the river, you was wet through all the time. You was never dry, you know. Never ever dry. Oh, no. That's the thing you didn't. Lived in flannel underpants, flannel clothes, or no coats. You never wore a coat. Was that of interest? Is that of interest?
Why didn't you wear a coat?
You couldn't wear coats in the... Oh, no. No, you couldn't work in that bush with coats. Well, you might with the modern ones, I don't know, but you couldn't, no.
Too heavy or what?
Oh, horrible, yeah, I think so. You never see a man in the Gordon River working with coat. I never wore a coat in the bush till I left Tasmania. Never wore a coat. Never wore a hat. Hair used to hang down over my eyes and